Hey friends, welcome to the Sales Strategies for Christian Coaches podcast. I'm Justin Janowski, your host. I started my business Faith2Influence in 2018, and in my first year, I did over $250,000 in revenue. This was far beyond what I imagined, and no doubt God really provided for my business. I also know, though, that there were a few things that I knew how to do that most new Christian coaches and entrepreneurs don't know how to do yet or struggle with in the early days. That includes how to design and price your signature offer for your coaching business. It includes how to sell structurally and also the mindset that you need around sales and money. And so what I do is I help Christian coaches now optimize their business models and their pricing strategies while learning high integrity sales strategies and executing those so that they can build the business of their dreams and serve the kingdom in the way that they do it. And so that's what this podcast is about. It's about helping you learn some of those strategies. And today I want to teach you one of the most important questions you can ask yourself in business. Two of the most important words. It's a nice, simple question. And the question is, by when? By when will you follow through on that commitment? By when will you take that action? By when will you achieve that goal? I learned this question to really prioritize this question from my friends Tommy Breedlove and Chris Tuff, two USA Today best-selling authors, really great men and leaders of men. And they ask themselves this question, by when? You know, you've probably had the experience of catching up with an old friend or running into somebody that you know and having one of you or they say, hey, we should catch up sometime. We should grab coffee sometime. We should go out for dinner sometime. We should get a drink sometime. We should jump on a call sometime. And the other person oftentimes responds, yeah, we should do that. Let's do it. But if there's no plan, if neither party asks by when should we do this, then there's no execution, there's no follow through, and the get together doesn't usually happen. Well, the same thing's true with most of our goals in business. Recently, we had a conference, the Christian Coaches Academy CCA Live conference this summer in Milwaukee. And one of our attendees, Steve Thompson, a good friend of mine, a great man, ended up at that conference saying, I'm going to launch my podcast. Well, Steve had been thinking about launching a podcast for quite a while. It had been an idea that was stuck on the shelf. And at the conference, I said to Steve, I said, by when will you launch your podcast? And Steve chose a date on the calendar. It was like 3 weeks or 4 weeks after the conference. And he said, by that date, I will launch my podcast. Might have only been 2 weeks. It was probably 2 or 3 weeks after the conference. He said, by that date, my first episodes will be launched. And by asking him by when and having him claim a date on the calendar, you know what happened? Steve began to take all the necessary action to launch by that date. And that's exactly what he did. And now he's got a great podcast that he is recording new episodes for every single week. And it's about legacy for Christian leaders. It's like the Christian Leaders Legacy Podcast or something like that. You could type in Christian Legacy Podcast, Steve Thompson, and I'm sure you could find it. It's a really cool thing, though, for Steve to have this idea that he wanted to execute on for a long time and to be asked the most simple question. And then to take massive action because of the answer that he had to that question. I think about David Lee, who was the first coach I coached in my business. I started out working with Christian entrepreneurial men. They weren't necessarily coaches. A lot of them were salespeople. A lot of them were, some of them were realtors. Some of them were financial advisors, a number of different backgrounds. And David was the first person I coached who wanted to be a coach. And he said he'd been wanting to be a coach for years. In fact, he told me that he had been coaching people for decades for free. He just hadn't structured a real business around it. And he wanted to become a coach. And he wanted to be a coach for a while. But the most important question I asked him was, by when will you quit your job and start your coaching business or go all in on your coaching business? And I remember David picking a date on the calendar and saying it was something like June 15th or June 30th, I will quit my job and be all in on my coaching business. And once he made that commitment, that decision, that was months away, by the way, it gave him a runway, it gave him time. He began to take all the necessary actions to make that dream a reality. That date was on the calendar and it was real. And what happened? He did launch his business by that date. He did quit his job by that date. And in his first year, he had a 6-figure business as we worked together. Within a couple of years, he had a multiple 6-figure business that he still runs today. That question of buy when got him off the fence and into the game. And it's an important question for me too. In fact, it was interesting. I learned this question from Chris and Tommy, but I remember being at an event, and it was one of my first times being in person with Chris. We'd met on Zoom several times, but this was an opportunity. Chris spoke at the event. I was leading sales effort at the same event, and I came up to Chris after at lunch. I said, "Wow, Chris, I loved your speech. That was awesome. When are you going to run your live event?" By when are you going to run your live event? Or I think I began with, have you ever thought about running a live event? And he said, yeah, I've thought about it. And I said, great. I think you'd be really great at it. Do you want to run an event? And he said, yes. And I said, great. By when would you like to run the event? And then I asked if he'd like to have, he's like, well, let's have a conversation about it. I'd love to talk about it. I don't know how to do it exactly. I don't know all the rules. I don't know all the things that I need to take action on. And I said, okay, cool. Let's have a conversation. By when would you like to have a conversation? I said, I have my phone in my pocket right now. Can we book a time to talk next week after we get back from this retreat? And he agreed, and we booked the time then and there. And he ended up hiring me. And it was a 5-figure deal to support him in bringing his live event to life and building out his mastermind program. And Chris has made so many amazing referrals for me and created so many more opportunities for me beyond that first one, because I was willing to ask by when. I was willing to be bold with the question. I was willing to book the call on the spot instead of him saying, we should talk about that sometime, and me saying, yeah, let's do it. And then saving some follow-up for later that may or may not happen, that may or may not be successful. When the opportunity presented itself, I asked the question by when, and I moved forward in action. I've tried to do this again and again in my business. We put deadlines on projects we're working on every single week with my team. We get on the team meeting. We use Trello. It's a free resource. And we list out all our projects and we put the dates that we want to accomplish or complete the project by. Now, oftentimes, we're not able to achieve every one of those dates. There's a lot of moving parts in my business these days. And so sometimes the date needs to be moved back or it needs to be changed. But we're asking ourselves every single week, by when can we complete this project? By when can we take the next step? And that helps us keep moving forward. And so that's my big invitation to you, to ask yourself the question, by when? And as a coach, as a leader, for people that you serve, for people that you care about, ask them the same question, by when? If someone says at the end of a sales call, I want to think about it, I'm like, awesome, I totally understand. What do you want to think about? And I might get curious about that. I might ask some questions. But if they're like, yeah, I need some time to think about this and make this decision. I need to sleep on it. I need to pray about it. My version of by when is to say, I totally understand. Why don't you think on it, sleep on it, pray on it? Can you make a decision by tomorrow, or do you need till Friday? And they'll say, oh, how about Friday? Okay, awesome. Can we schedule a 15-minute follow-up call on Friday where we can make that decision together? And they're going to say, yes, I'm going to book that call now. I'm going to do by when right now. Cool. They need a little bit more time. I'm okay with that. By when will the decision be made? Ultimately, your success, your effectiveness, and your efficiency as a coach and an entrepreneur will be greatly impacted by your capacity and willingness to ask yourself, your prospects, and your clients that important, simple, and powerful question, by when? If you're ready to ask yourself by when, and you're ready to take the next step in your business, and you have not yet taken our 4-day 100K Christian Coach Challenge, I want to invite you to take that now. It's only $7. It's 4 days of amazing recordings that are going to help you move into action and begin building the business of your dreams. You can find the challenge at www.salesisgood.com. God bless you all, and I'll see you next week.